It's the show the establishment warned you about.
That's right. It's the Dr. Tommy Show. Glad you're here. This is Wednesday. No, it's Tuesday. Tuesday here in Tampa, Florida, in the free state of Florida. I'm your host, Dr. Tommy McElroy, broadcasting from Echelon Health Studios, and glad you're here. So if you want to see the podcast, YouTube, Rumble, and you can listen to it or watch it on Spotify, and you can also listen to it on any of the podcasting platforms. They should all be up and running. Amazon, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Spotify, whatever. Go to drtommy.com. It's doctor spelled out /podcast, and then you can jump off from there. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about heart scans. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about it is because heart disease is the number one killer of people in the United States, probably in the Western Hemisphere, or not Western Hemisphere, and I don't know. Anyway, in the United States, it's the number one cause of death, and because of that, we should say what can we do about it to help people not die from heart disease? And the number one thing you can do, which is not recommended by any of the major establishment type organizations, whether it be the AMA, the CDC, the NIH, the AAFP, the AMA. I already said AMA. Anyway, none of these organizations recommend it, but you can do it. And what you should do is called a coronary CT angiogram. And so if you go to drtommy.com and you see this wonderful couple here meeting with Dr. Tommy from the 1950s, you scroll down here, and then there's this part where it says good health starts with prevention. And we say one of the ways you can prevent, stay healthy as possible is to check for heart disease with a coronary CT angiogram. And I wanted to go through what that entails. Now I want to show you some pictures. So this is pictures, and if you're not watching, if you're listening, I'll just describe them for you, okay? So here's the first picture. This is a picture of the heart. This is a CT image of the heart, reconstructed with the software of this high-tech CT scanning device. That's the heart. So this is the back of the heart. This is what do they call this? Hell, I can't remember right off the top of my back. It's a posterior descending artery, I think. And anyway, so this is the back of the heart, right? I will show you more pictures. This is the front of the heart. This is what we recognize more. This is the widowmaker. So that's the artery that goes down the front of the heart that basically controls, or not controls, but supplies the vast majority of the left ventricle. And the left ventricle is the chamber of the heart which pumps blood to your brain and to your body. Left ventricle. The right ventricle pumps blood to your lungs, and then the blood goes to your lungs and then back to your heart through the pulmonary vein into the heart, into the left atrium, then it goes to the left ventricle, out through the aorta, and there you go. That's the heart cycle. Anyway, so this is the front of the heart. Okay. This is a picture of the heart with the aorta and the coronary vessels selected out using software. Okay. This is the left side. This is the right side. You have two main arteries off the heart, the left ventricle and the the left coronary artery and the right coronary artery. And the right coronary artery does the right side of the heart and the back of the heart. And then the left coronary artery does the bulk of the left ventricle. And it has something called a left circumflex and a left anterior descending. And then it's got these branches off of them, obtuse marginal branches and other things. So that's the basic outflow of the heart. So and here's another picture. Here's the aorta, all the heart subtracted. There's the nice big red veins or arteries. Now this is actually Tracy's heart. This is her actual heart, and it looks nice and healthy. And she has a zero amount of plaque, 0 hard plaque, 0 soft plaque. And that's important because sometimes you can get what's called a calcium score. And a calcium score is a score of the calcium that's present in the arteries of the heart. And what that indicates is there's old plaque there. And when I say old, I mean more than a few years old. And the reason it's called the reason it's calcified is because that's what the body does when there's damage in certain parts of the body. It could be in the muscles, it could be in the veins, it could be in the arteries. But anyway, in the arteries, once plaque's been there for a while, it becomes calcified. It's your body's way of kind of stabilizing things, and you get calcification. And if you get a calcium score, you'll get an indication of a approximation of how much plaque you have in your arteries. Now, that's fine and dandy, and it's not worthless, but it's not the complete picture, because what this type of scan will do, what I was just discussing with you, coronary CT angiogram, is it will actually tell you hard and soft plaque. Hard plaque is calcified, soft plaque is non-calcified. So let's say you have a bunch of non-calcified plaque and you have a little bit of calcified plaque. Let's say something happened in your life and suddenly you have a bunch of soft plaques and you go get a heart scan and it says, okay, your calcium score is 2. And you say, well, awesome. That means I have very little coronary disease. Well, that may be true or it may not be true. You may have a bunch of soft plaque. Now, soft plaque, you would like to eventually calcify. If you had your pick, you would say, I don't want any plaque in my heart, okay? Unless you're weird and you just like that kind of thing. But if you're a normal person, you say, look, I don't want to have plaque in my heart. I don't want to have heart disease. But I'm a realist and I understand it's the number one killer of people, and eventually a lot of people are going to get heart disease, so be it. So if you had soft plaques in your heart, what you'd really want is for them to eventually calcify. And the way they calcify is basically through age. And once they calcify, they become stable. And stable plaques, if they're small, are kind of just there. They're kind of like speed bumps. They don't really cause a problem as long as they're not too big, and away you go. So that would be ideal. Now, what will happen with a soft plaque is it can do a couple things. It can calcify, stay small, calcify, and then, like I said, not ever cause you a problem. It can continue to grow, and then it can rupture. And so that's the things that you don't want. You don't want it to continue to grow because it could block off the whole artery, and you don't want it to rupture because that causes a heart attack. And if it grows up so big that it's blocking your artery, then you start having chest pain when you're doing things. That's called angina or angina. And then what happens is you have to go to see your friendly cardiologist, and they stent you. Now, that's the point where establishment medicine picks up. They say, okay, you now have chest pain. You are eligible now to be treated for heart disease. Prior to that, they really don't give a shit. Honestly, there's some primary prevention that's done. They check your cholesterol and everything like that. Cholesterol, just to give you a little bit of a insider knowledge, is not the end all to be all. I have patients in the practice who have completely normal cholesterol, have heart disease out the wazoo. Also, I have patients with really bad cholesterol on paper who have no heart disease. So take that for what it's worth. Anyway, but basically establishment medicine says, all right, when you get heart disease, we will stent you. If you have, maybe we think you have heart disease, maybe we'll do a stress test on you. And so a stress test is where they put your heart through stress, either chemically, they inject some medicine there. Used to inject dobutamine. I don't know what they use anymore. Anyway, they inject some stuff, right, makes your heart kind of speed up. And then what happens is those little vessels, these coronary arteries, which supply your blood to your heart, that's what the coronary arteries do. There's not enough blood flow through those vessels, and your heart either changes so that you can see it on a nuclear stress test where there's changes on the picture that show up on the screen of the doctor, and they say, oh, look at there. Or you can have an EKG changes, or you can have echocardiogram where the echocardiogram shows the heart's not beating well. Whatever the case is, a stress test puts your heart through stress to see if there's a not enough blood flow. Now, they could also make you run and do an exercise stress test. Sometimes they do that. Anyway, all that's to say is that's all fine and dandy, and that's really good for predicting whether or not you're going to have chest pain while exercising. It does not really predict whether you're going to die from a heart attack or not. If you pass a stress test, that's better than not passing a stress test. But simply passing a stress test It's helpful. It's like I said, it's better than nothing. If you passed a stress test and had a calcium score that was 0, that would be good. That does not go all the way. The way to go all the way is to do a coronary CT angiogram. And when you do that, you can see if there's hard plaques or soft plaques, and you can see if basically if there's anything there. Now, why would you say, well, how can you die after you had a stress test? A stress test, you just said, is going to stress your heart, and it'll see if you have any problems. Yes, absolutely right. Let's say you have a stress test, and let's say you have this picture of this heart here. This heart, so you have a stress test, and there is a plaque right here. So this is your left anterior descending artery right here. Okay. Let's say there's a plaque right there. And let's say it's 30%. All right. And you have a stress test. And they really give it to you. They have you running, you're sweating and sweat's dripping everywhere. And you're just really, you've never exercised that hard in your life. And then the doctor looks at you and he says, sir, you have passed your stress test, or ma'am, you have passed your stress test. I put you through a stress that Navy SEALs couldn't withstand hardly, and you passed it. And you think, well, good gracious, thank you. I am so happy. I'm going to go home and I'm going to have a slice of cheesecake and some wine to celebrate. And then the next day, that 30% plaque ruptures, you have a heart attack, and you're dead. That's how you can die. And unfortunately, that happens. So anyway, back to my point is heart scans are the gold standard, and heart scans are not recommended by the establishment medicine, and which is why this is the podcast, the show that the establishment warned you about, because we go outside of what is considered polite discussion in medicine. You should not tell patients that they are missing out, because that makes us look bad before the establishment, makes us think, well, why aren't we doing that? Well, anyway, so back to how do you get this done? Well, here in Tampa, here in the free state of Florida, you can get it done. And one of the ways you can get it done is to go to South Tampa Cardiology, which is where we send our patients. That's not the only place. There's other places. But anyway, we send our patients here to South Tampa Cardiology. Where is it? There's a link. Dr. Morales' office is in South Tampa, and they'll run you through the CT scanner there. And nice person. That's not her. That's an actor. But anyway, there's a person down there, a nice lady, and she'll put an IV in your arm. They'll give you some contrast. You'll feel like you're peeing on yourself, or that's what they tell you. You feel warm all over. They run you through the scanner, tell you to take some deep breaths, and then out the door you go. Beginning to end, it's about an hour, about 15 minutes in the actual scanning room, maybe 20. And then your doctor will get a report, and he'll tell you, or she will tell you what's going on. Or Dr. Morales can do it himself. Anyway, that's what we do. We send our patients there, South Tampa Cardiology. But if you are interested in doing that, or interested in learning more about it, we have a podcast about it here. I used to have a link to it. Anyway, on our YouTube site, there's a podcast that Dr. Griffin and I did. And I took it down because YouTube embed was screwing up my website. So I took it down. But if you go to the same, all the podcasts, it all goes back. There's one with Dr. Griffin. Maybe I'll put it somewhere in the link to this one. Anyway, it talks more about it. But anyway, that's the upshot of it. Get a heart scan, CT, coronary CT angiogram. And that's that. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about these books that I've read. And this is Easter. Next Sunday is Easter. This coming Sunday is Easter. And this Friday is Good Friday. And so what is Good Friday? Good Friday is the day that Jesus was crucified. And he was crucified by the Romans at the behest of the Pharisees. And so this Friday is actually, I was listening to the radio the other day, K-Love, and they said that this Friday is historically the day that they think that Jesus was actually crucified, because as you know, Easter is not on the same day every year. It's based on the moon, and I don't even know why, but anyway, it's based on the moon. It's got something to do with Passover. And so that's that. So anyway, Jesus was crucified on Friday, and then was resurrected on Sunday. Anyway, there's these two books that I've read, and one is called, I'll just say them in order. So one of them that I read them in order is called The Case for, I first read Case for a Creator. And so what is Case for a Creator? So Case for a Creator is a book that is written by Lee Strobel, and he's an interesting guy. He is he's a journalist by trade, but he also has a Master of Laws degree. Now, I don't know if that means I don't know if that's the same thing as a JD or whatever that means. Anyway, he's got training in law and training in journalism. And he used to work for the Chicago Tribune, I think it was. Yeah, Chicago Tribune. Anyway, so when he first started out, and this goes back to this other book, Case for Christ, more back to the story, but his biography is basically, he was an atheist. He married an agnostic. So he did not believe in God. He married someone who did not know if there was a God or not. She was, kind of she didn't say there was, she didn't say there wasn't. She just didn't know. Anyway, short story, his wife later became a Christian, and he was initially worried about this, very concerned, because he thought she would become this prude and, just not the woman he signed up for. And he was very distressed about this. And that's what the book, actually the movie, there's a movie called The Case for Christ. That's what the movie is about. Anyway, The Case for the Creator picks up with the beginning of the earth, and it talks about what is the case for Creator, meaning is there a good reason to believe that the earth was created by God versus alternative theories. And so I just wanted to go over this book a little bit here. And I had my little co-pilot friend here I said, Case for Creator main points. And it says, Strobel starting point from atheism to investigation. Strobel begins as a committed atheist whose worldview is grounded in naturalism. So he believed, like we're told, he believed in the science. The science says that the world started from nothing and became something. And the whole universe actually started from nothing and became the universe. And then subsequent to that, life started from non-life and became life. And then cells became cells, and they reproduced. And anyway, he had started off with a scientific explanation for existence, essentially. And then he started looking into, because he was an investigative journalist. Actually, I guess he was an investigative journalist. He used to cover the crime beat. Anyway, he started looking into some of these different things about the improbability of life arising from non-living matter, the diminishing relevance of the Miller-Urey experiment. So what that was, and I actually learned about this in college, and I didn't realize it at the time, but the Miller-Urey experiment was in the 1950s. And basically what they did was they recreated what they thought was the environment of the Earth during the early times of the Earth, let's say before there was life. And they put it in a test tube, or a big glass flask, and they put in like some ammonia, and they put in some oxygen, and I forget what else. But anyway, they did that, and they ran some sparks through it, and the sparks were to simulate lightning, and then, lo and behold, amino acids were made. And from that experiment, people said, well, holy crap, we showed that's how you do it. That's how it was done. There was this primordial gases and stuff, and then lightning, and then boom, suddenly there was a explosion, and from there it made some small little units, and those units gathered together, and they said, hey, let's make a cell. And so they made a cell, and then the cell said, hey, let's make another cell, and then we'll grow into a lobster. And then the lobster says, I'm going to grow into a fish. Anyway, there you go. Eventually get a human. So that's the beginning. That's the Miller-Urey experiment. And then it says, it continues talking about natural selection. And and then it talks about the universe. And so the universe to me is one of those things that when I was a kid, I asked my dad about the universe, and he said the universe has always been there. And I didn't really understand that. And that was I guess that was the leading way that the kids were taught when he was younger. But actuality is they believe now that there was a Big Bang. And so what was the Big Bang? Well, the Big Bang was a time in the history of our universe where there was nothing, and then suddenly there became something. And if you look at the scientific explanation, they can actually go back somehow and do some calculations, and they can find how big was the known universe at like very, 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 very small a matter of time after the Big Bang. They can't say at the Big Bang, but somehow or another through math and quantum mechanics and things, they can determine what the size of it was. And it was about the size of like a golf ball. And at that time, all of the matter of the whole universe was in that golf ball. And before that, there was no quantum force. There was no atomic force. There was no gravitational force. There was no time. There was no space. What else? Everything was just non-existent, and it was all in this little ball. And the way they describe it is they said the ball was infinitely hot and infinitely dense. And then the explosion happened, and away we go. And then the Big Bang, Edwin Hubble was able to see in 1929 how the universe was expanding. And that actually reaffirmed a calculation that Einstein had done on the theory of relativity that showed that the Earth was either expanding or contracting. And Hubble's visual studies of universes using telescopes was able to show that this was the case. It was the redshift. The redshift was what determined that there was actually movement of galaxies apart from each other. Anyway, so cosmology, the universe had a beginning, and Strobel says, and he interviews people who say that the universe's beginning is exactly consistent with what the Bible says, the Christian Bible and the Jewish Bible, which would be the Old Testament. And so it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And that was it. Boom. That was it. That was the beginning. And so this flies in the face of the previous assumption was that the universe was always there. So now we know scientifically, or we think we know, that the universe had a beginning. And Strobel's book here talks to people who say it's likely that the beginning was truly the beginning as it was shown in the Bible. And the reason for the belief of that is that, this also reaffirms the belief in God being outside of the universe. Basically, God is not on the same plane as the universe. We cannot think of God as being in the same way we think of time and space in our understanding of it. This part of the book is really interesting to me, and it wasn't something that I was very familiar with. It's called The Fine-Tuning of the Universe. And so what it talks about is, it says that the universe is so finely tuned that if it was a little bit off in one direction or another, and they talk about different constants, like I think it's called the universal cosmic constant and Planck's constant and gravitation and the gravitational pulls. If these things were just a little bit different, then we could not have Earth or the universe as we know it now, because it would not be stable. Okay, so this is a little bit beyond my understanding of it, but I can understand it by reading it. I can't understand enough to argue for or against it. But what they do say, though, is in this book, they talk about it, and they say, well, that is true. The universe is very, very, very finely tuned. And the creator, or the intelligent design, if you want to call it that, people who believe in a creator, they say that this is proof that there is an intelligent mind behind the fine-tuning of the universe, because it is done so precisely, as if someone was designing a watch here on Earth. So precise, the movements are so fine that everything works. And if they were off a little bit, if the gears were just a little bit too big or whatever, the watch wouldn't work. Well, same thing with the universe. Whoever created this universe had such an exquisite mind, and everything that they made it, he or she or whoever made it to where it's just precise. Well, not the scientific, I guess you call it, non-theistic view of this is that yes, the universe is finely tuned, but guess why? It's because of the multiverse. So one of the explanations for the fine-tuning of the universe is that we are in this universe and we are talking to you today, and I'm doing this podcast today on a table, talking to a camera over the internet because this universe is so finely tuned, it got it right. But what we don't know is that there is multiple universes, and there are some universes that are not finely tuned, and there is no Dr. Tommy show there. There's no shows at all because it's not finely tuned, and we just are able to experience this because we happen to be in the one universe that is finely tuned enough that you and I can communicate over the internet through a Dr. Tommy show. So that's their explanation, is that there's multiple universes, maybe infinite number of universes. Now, this gets to the idea of faith. And one of the things that people say about people who believe in God is they say, well, you just have to have faith and that's the only thing you have. And well, faith isn't enough for me. I have to have proof. Well, I think you have to have more faith to believe that there is multiple universes and some way to make multiple universes from nothing than to believe that there was somebody who just made it. I think that takes more faith. I think the former takes more faith than the latter, in that you have to, in order to believe that multiple universes are made, multiple meaning many, maybe infinite number of universes have been made, and we just so happen to be in the right one at the right time that we're able to communicate, and here we are, we have consciousness, this, that, and the other. And that is more likely than there's a God that did it. To me, I think the other one takes more faith, believing in multiverses. There's some more stuff here. It talks about a lot of things. I don't want to belabor it too much, but it's a good book. It's called The Case for a Creator. They talk about consciousness. They talk about science and faith not being, he says, they're not enemies. Science and faith are not enemies. They're compatible. Consciousness in the mind talks about what is consciousness? Is consciousness a biologic thing? And if so, there's an argument that consciousness is a result of intelligence, and intelligence is a result of neural connections. And then some people believe that at some point, because of neural connections being what is causing AI to explode so quickly, that someday AI will have consciousness. And this kind of talks about that a little bit. And anyway, they talk about some DNA. I want to talk to you a little bit about DNA later. So anyway, that's The Case for the Creator, Lee Strobel. Now, there's another book called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And this was the first book he wrote. This was actually the one that talks about more of his personal travels through atheism to being a Christian, and then why he did it. And it covers some of the same things, but this talks more about Jesus, and Jesus as a person, and Jesus as a historical person, and then Jesus as God, which is the big sticking point between Judaism and Christianity, obviously. So anyway, it's called The Case for Christ. And it talks about the New Testament and says, how reliable is the New Testament? And in the book, he says that there's actually more copies of the New Testament and the Gospels than there are of many ancient literature books. And they happened around 100 to 200 years within the time period of Christ. All of these multiple copies. And there's some variances between them. There's some words that are not the same. But the overall picture or story, I guess you call it, is the same. And then they talk about the earliest writings of the Bible, the New Testament, came in, I believe it was in Corinthians, from Paul. And so Paul wrote in Corinthians within years of the crucifixion of Christ. And then the other books came along later. But anyway, the New Testament, when it's stacked up against other books of ancient origin, there's actually more copies of the New Testament and more historical, I guess, documentation of the New Testament than other books, like the Odyssey, for instance. Then they talk about Jesus' existence. Is there evidence for his existence outside of the Bible? And there is. There's a guy named Josephus who wrote. It's one of the things he wrote about. And one of the things that's interesting to me, though, is reading about this. There's this other book I read. It's called Understanding Jesus. And the reason for that book, and I believe it's written by N.T. Wright. I was going to look it up before I did this show, but I didn't. Anyway, that book talks about Jesus as a person. And what that book says is that, Jesus existed. He was here. And it talks more about kind of like the mind of Jesus, meaning what did he think of himself? Did he think when he was born that he was God? And the answer, according to N.T. Wright in this book, Understanding Jesus, is that he believed that he was called to do a specific thing, which was to basically restore Israel, restore the kingdom of God. And as he became older, through prayer and reflection and other things, he became to understand exactly who he was. Toward the end of his life, it wasn't until he started his his ministry, the last 3 years of his life, that he realized that I'm divine. Now, this is probably, besides the origin of the earth and the idea of God being on a different plane than us, like we are aware of time, we're aware of space, and God is on he's not even in the same realm. That's hard to believe or hard to understand. I think the other thing that's equally hard to understand is the Trinity. And that's why a lot of it is controversial to even some factions of Christianity, because they say, the Trinity was made up. The Trinity was the council of, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, there's a council that came up. They're the ones that put together the first accepted final form of the New Testament. And they say, well, the Trinity was created during that time. And then Jesus never proclaimed himself as God. And he never said that in the Bible. Therefore, that was a creation of man, and the Trinity is bogus, and away you go. Anyway, so this book delves into that a lot. It talks about who is God, this book meaning the case for Christ, but also in understanding Jesus. They both are kind of similar in that fashion. But anyway, one of the things that's obviously for centuries been hard to understand for Christians is the Trinity and the existence of God as three people, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And it's very deep, and it's very interesting to read about. And in the book Understanding Jesus, N.T. Wright says that, he didn't think he was God, walking around thinking, I'm the second, as I think the term was, is that God, Jesus never walked around saying, I'm the second person in this Trinity here, meaning God being the first, him being the Son, and then the Holy Spirit the third. He never thought of himself that way, but he had come to understand that he was divine eventually, which is, talking about Easter, there's a part at the end where Jesus is near his death, where he looks up to the sky and he says, why hast thou forsaken me? Why are you doing this to me? Why? And I always read that and I thought, or heard that, and I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Because if Jesus is God, he's talking to God, asking, it's like people say, well, is he talking to himself? And another thing in this book they talk about is, was Jesus crazy? Because there's people walking around today, there's people locked up in mental institutions who say they're Jesus or the Messiah. So anyway, they're saying, is he crazy? That's another thing goes into. But anyway, this whole idea of the Trinity and how Jesus could be God in man. as a man. And I think that's one of the things that is the most compelling if you're into thinking about things like that. And then it talks about the resurrection, obviously, and it goes into really good detail about the resurrection. And one of the things I didn't realize about the resurrection is that the disciples, the 12 disciples who were with Jesus before he was crucified, then after the resurrection, and a lot of them, when he was crucified, felt like they were very distraught, because they said, well, this is it. I mean, they never thought that if this was really the Messiah, that he could be killed by Romans. And, that's just their whole, they were deflated essentially, because this was their leader. He was the one that was leading them. And then suddenly he was gone, and they were just like, well, maybe that was all just for naught. And then he was resurrected. And those people, some of them who, like I said, even his brother James, did not believe his story. James thought he was basically embarrassed by him. He's like, who's this? My brother is just he's saying all these crazy things. It's not true. And you have to understand that Jesus was a rabbi. He was a Jewish teacher, and he was essentially blaspheming what the Jews were teaching at that time. And so his brother was embarrassed by them. And Thomas, the famous doubting Thomas, disciple, did not believe until he actually saw the resurrected body and put his fingers in the wounds. Anyway, all this is to say is that those 12 people, one of the things they say is like, well, that never happened. That's can't happen. People don't rise from the dead. Okay. Well, I grant you that's unusual. I will also grant you it's unusual that everything that you see around you right now, everything that you have ever thought of, everything that you've ever read about, everything that you've ever seen a picture of in a telescope, once existed in an infinitely small area that was infinitely hot, and then it all expanded to nothing. Now, I think that, although it happened, according to both atheists and Christians, that did happen. I think that's extremely hard to understand. So, although resurrecting a dead person's hard to understand, I give it some, I say, well, it's possible. Anyway, back to the disciples is one of the reasons they say that Jesus was resurrected is because all of the disciples, except for 2, were martyred, and usually do not get martyred for something you don't believe in. When it comes down to brass tacks, if you're about to be martyred, killed, if they say, look, renounce your beliefs or you're gonna be murdered, you're gonna be killed, you're gonna be executed. If you really didn't believe, most people would be like, all right, fine. It was a hoax. I admit it. I never saw God. I never saw Jesus, or whatever the case is. But 10 of the 12 disciples, and maybe even the last 2 even, were martyred in some very horrific ways. And people don't usually do that for things they didn't believe in for real. Because there's some talk about, well, it was just all, and this goes against this idea that the idea of Jesus as God or Jesus as divine was created centuries later, because these people were killed within decades of Jesus being crucified. This was not later. This was at the time. These were people who lived and walked with Jesus before. Anyway, that's the case for Christ. Like I said, the other one's called the case for the understanding Jesus. Now, here's another one called, this is the first actual book I read on it, about it, meaning creation and things like that. It's called The Creator and the Cosmos. Now, this book is very dense. This is written by Hugh Ross, who is an astrophysicist, I believe. It says it here, down here somewhere. Anyway, he's a scientist. And so there's some of the same people talk. I don't know if Hugh Ross does, but there's some of the same people in both of these books that are interviewed and used as references. But anyway, this book talks very deeply about the science and, like I said, the fine tuning and the understanding of what exactly it takes for a universe to be here, and how was it made, and was it made by chance? One of the anecdotes they give is that if you were to walk, it's called the stopwatch, And if you were, let's say that you were walking by the creek or a river and you stumbled across a stopwatch and you pick it up, and you've never seen one before, you would immediately think, wow, someone designed this. And they use that as an analogy for the universe. Is if you look out in the universe, or if you look in the human body, you may say, well, someone designed this. And you would not think that that stopwatch came into being just by chance. Another anecdote they say is that, to believe that things like this came by chance would be like believing that a hurricane could pass through a plant that builds airplanes, and then somehow the airplane become built from all that chaos from nothing, creates something that's very ordered, which is it's a one way to think about it. But anyway, these are just 3 books, 4 if you include Understanding Jesus, that if you're interested in learning more about it, it's very interesting to me. I wanted to show you this. This is a video. I'm not going to show you the whole thing because it's too long. But this goes back to the idea of, did things occur, were they designed, or did they just kind of happen on their own? And here's just a video. This is from Your Genome. That's a YouTube website or YouTube site called Your Genome. And it says from DNA to protein. And I'm just going to play a little bit over here. If you're listening, it's going to describe it. And if you're watching, you can see it.
Before the messenger RNA can be used as a template for the production of proteins, it needs to be processed. This involves removing and adding sections of RNA. The messenger RNA then moves out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm. Protein factories in the cytoplasm, called ribosomes, bind to the messenger RNA. The ribosome reads the code in the messenger RNA to produce a chain made up of amino acids. There are 20 different types of amino acid. Transfer RNA molecules carry the amino acids to the ribosome. The messenger RNA is read 3 bases at a time. As each triplet is read, a transfer RNA delivers the corresponding amino acid. This is added to a growing chain of amino acids. Once the last amino acid has been added, the chain folds into a complex 3D shape to form the protein.
So that says it folds, and there's a reason it folds. It just doesn't fold on its own. The reason it folds is because each one of those amino acids had a specific charge, and all the different charges on these amino acids attract to each other, and that's why it folds. It folds because of that. And it folds in a very specific environment. It folds at a very specific temperature. It folds at a very specific pH. Now, wrap your head around all that. And that was part of DNA to protein. That wasn't even the whole thing, because I cut out the part where it says DNA into RNA, which is in itself a whole different ball of wax. And then there's DNA replication and blah, blah, all the way down the line. Just that little piece of there from DNA or RNA, messenger RNA to protein. All of that, now you decide for yourself. Was that gradually done through mutations that were spontaneous, not driven by anything other than chance? Or did that come from a creator? I'll just leave you with that. Anyway, this is Dr. Tommy Show. Thank you for joining us. Join us next time and go to drtommy.com/podcast if you're listening, interested in more Dr. Tommy Show, and come by and visit us in Tampa if you're so inclined. And until next time, bye-bye.
This symbol holds the secret. It will unlock your destiny. I understand, Father. Go now.